Okay, let's unpack this. You're trying to master English, and, well, you love kicking back with a great movie or maybe binge watching a TV series. It really feels like the perfect way to learn, doesn't it? Immerse yourself in native speech, just soak it all in.
Mm,
But then the show starts, and boom, the words just come so fast. They blend together in ways you never really heard in grammar class.
right.
You read the subtitles, maybe even in English,
Mm.
but it still feels like you're kind of chasing the meaning, always, a step behind. That feeling of frustration, like you should be learning more from this, but it's just not clicking. It's incredibly common.
It absolutely is.
Right.
The English you encounter in textbooks or, say, structured language courses is often slowed down a bit, perfectly enunciated, and uses relatively formal grammar.
Yeah, very clean.
Very clean, exactly. But the English spoken by native speakers in movies and TV, it's a whole different beast. It's packed with contractions, rapid linking of words, slang, idioms, rhythms that can make it sound completely alien if you're not prepared. Your brain, quite naturally, will gravitate towards the easiest path to comprehension, which, let's face it, is often reading the subtitles, even if they're in English.
Right, because you want to follow the story.
Precisely. And while that helps you follow the plot, it totally bypasses the crucial skill of actively processing the sounds of natural, fast English. You're not really training your ear.
Exactly. So the big question is, how do you transform that enjoyable time you spend watching shows from just, a passive experience into a genuinely powerful engine for boosting your English skills? That is the core mission for this deep dive.
Mhm.
We've taken the stack of sources you've provided, and we're going to extract the most actionable strategies. We're not just going to broadly tell you to watch TV in English. We're going to break down how to watch it specifically, step by step,
Mhm.
so that every minute, well, hopefully every minute, counts towards real language improvement.
And this deep dive is crafted specifically for you, the learner who enjoys entertainment but really wants to leverage that enjoyment to make serious progress in English. We're going to guide you through the entire process, starting with perhaps the most fundamental decision: how to select content that is genuinely appropriate for your current English level.
Yeah, not just what's popular.
Not just what's popular or what your friends are watching, exactly. That's a key point.
Right, because picking the wrong thing can actually be counterproductive, can it?
Totally.
Once you've got that sorted, we'll get into the nitty-gritty techniques. We'll show you how to train your ears to deconstruct that fast, natural spoken English to actually hear the words where before you just heard a blur.
And we'll tackle the often misunderstood role of subtitles.
Yeah.
Are they helpful? Are they a crutch? Maybe both. We'll show you the specific methods outlined in the sources for using them effectively to aid learning rather than, letting them become a substitute for listening.
And it doesn't stop with just listening and understanding. I mean, the ultimate goal is to speak confidently.
Right. That's the goal for most people, yeah.
So we'll explore practical methods for using the very dialogue you hear in movies and shows to practice and improve your own speaking skills. Everything from pronunciation to rhythm and intonation.
By the time we wrap up this deep dive, you should have a very clear step-by-step roadmap. You'll know how to choose the right movies or shows, how to listen actively to really train your ear, how to integrate subtitles strategically, and how to turn listening practice into active speaking practice. You'll be equipped, hopefully, to make your next streaming session a significant, tangible step forward in your English learning journey.
So let's move beyond that feeling of just being overwhelmed by fast native speech. Let's shift our focus and dive headfirst into the very first crucial decision you need to make: selecting the right content for your level.
Choosing material that's a good fit is absolutely foundational, and it's where many learners inadvertently trip up. It's tempting, isn't it, to just pick a show everyone's talking about or maybe a classic movie you love, regardless of the language difficulty.
Oh yeah, definitely. You want to be in the loop.
Exactly. But if the content is too far above your current level, you'll just feel completely lost.
And that leads straight to frustration, discouragement, and ultimately, you'll probably just give up on using that particular show for learning, or maybe even give up on the whole method entirely.
That's a real risk.
On the flip side, if the content is, well, too easy, you're not challenged, you might get bored, and you're certainly not pushing yourself to acquire new vocabulary or structures or sounds.
Right.
The sources really emphasize this critical point: the need to find that perfect balance. It's about finding content that is challenging enough to offer new learning opportunities, but accessible enough that you can actually engage with it meaningfully. Not too hard, not too easy.
And thankfully, the sources provide a wonderfully practical and pretty easy to implement test for finding this balance.
Yeah.
The 50-70% rule. The idea is simple. Watch a short segment, maybe just 30 seconds, maybe a minute, from a movie or show without any subtitles at all. Based purely on listening, do you understand roughly 50 to 70% of the dialogue?
50 to 70%. That seems like a very specific range. Why is that the sweet spot?
Well, it's key because it strikes that balance we just talked about. If you understand less than 50%, the content is probably just too difficult for you right now.
Too much unknown.
Way too much unknown. There are too many unfamiliar words, maybe too much complex grammar, or the speech is just too fast or unclear for your current ear. You lack the context to even guess the meaning of the unknown parts, and it quickly becomes overwhelming, just pure guesswork.
Right, you can't really build on what you know if you know less than half of it. It's like trying to build a wall with missing bricks.
Precisely. You're missing too many bricks in the wall. That's a good way to put it. Now, if you understand more than 70%, it might mean the content is a little too easy for active learning. You're basically confirming what you already know, which is, fine for reinforcement sometimes. But you're not exposing yourself to enough new language to drive significant improvement and expansion of your vocabulary or your understanding of more complex structures or faster speech patterns.
So the 50 to 70% range ensures there's enough known language, that 50 to 70%, to provide a solid base of context. You can understand the general gist of what's happening, who's talking about what, the overall situation. And this understanding of the known helps you make, like, educated guesses about the unknown parts, the 30 to 50% you didn't initially catch.
Exactly. You hear a sentence you only partially understand, but because you got most of it, maybe from the words you knew and the visuals,
Yep.
you can often infer the meaning of the one or two words you missed. Use the surrounding dialogue and the visual context on screen.
Which is how we learn language naturally anyway, right? Using context.
Absolutely. It's how native speakers acquire language, too. They use context constantly to learn. The 50-70% rule ensures you have that crucial context available while still providing ample new language to actually learn from.
It makes perfect sense. It's challenging, but it feels achievable. And to help you get started with finding content that might fit this rule, the sources offer some really excellent level-specific recommendations. Maybe we should run through those with some more specific examples.
Yeah, let's do that. For beginners, the absolute priority is clarity, simplicity, and strong visual context. You need language that is spoken clearly and at a, let's say, a manageable pace, with straightforward stories. Animated movies are often a fantastic starting point.
Like the classics.
Yeah, like Toy Story, Finding Nemo, or even newer ones like Encanto. The characters usually have very clear, often slightly exaggerated pronunciation, which is helpful.
True, they enunciate very well.
They really do. And the dialogue is usually less complex than in adult dramas, focusing on concrete actions and, clear emotional states. Plus, the animation itself provides strong visual cues that directly support comprehension. I see what they're talking about.
Yeah, think about Toy Story. Buzz Lightyear has that very distinct, almost deliberate speech when he first arrives.
Right.
Woody's dialogue is maybe a bit faster, but still pretty clear. And the plot revolves around toys and adventures that are generally easy to follow visually. You see them running, jumping, falling, blend. The actions match the words pretty closely.
Exactly. Another great option for beginners, according to the sources, are sitcoms that focus on everyday life and common situations. Friends is a classic recommendation for a reason.
Oh yeah, everyone suggests Friends.
And it works. While the pace can sometimes pick up, the core vocabulary revolves around daily interactions, relationships, work, social situations, stuff you encounter. The humor often comes from relatable misunderstandings or reactions you can actually see on the characters' faces, which adds another layer of context.
That's true. The physical comedy helps.
Definitely. Modern Family is another good one mentioned. Following the lives of a large, diverse family, the situations are very common, family dinners, school events, work issues, and you see characters interacting in familiar settings like homes, schools, restaurants.
Sitcoms are great too because the episodes are usually self-contained or follow pretty simple arcs, which makes them feel less daunting than maybe a long, complex movie.
Right, you get a sense of completion quickly.
And for learners at a very basic level, or maybe even young adult learners starting out, the sources suggest something interesting. Content specifically designed for children, which can be surprisingly effective for adult learners too. Shows like Peppa Pig or Bluey.
Yeah, don't let the fact of for kids fool you. Peppa Pig, for instance, uses extremely simple sentence structures, a very limited core vocabulary that gets repeated often, And pretty much every single action or object is clearly shown on screen. The narrator often describes exactly what is happening.
Very direct.
Very direct. Bluey is maybe a little more complex, but still features very clear dialogue, focuses on imaginative play and family interactions, and uses common everyday language. Honestly, watching a 10-minute episode of Peppa Pig multiple times can be incredibly effective for drilling basic vocabulary and sentence patterns in a fun, low-stress way.
So for beginners, look for clarity, simplicity, strong visual support, and relatable everyday topics. Makes sense. Now, what about intermediate learners? You've got a foundational vocabulary, maybe you can handle slightly more complexity.
Yeah, intermediate learners can start wading into more natural-paced conversations and a wider range of vocabulary, but still usually within relatively clear contexts. TV dramas that aren't overly complex plot-wise but feature natural conversational dialogue are a good fit here.
Like what?
Well, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is mentioned. It's a police precinct comedy, but the core interactions between the characters are fast, witty, and use a lot of common conversational English, including jokes and banter. The Office, the US version is often cited, features a lot of improvisation and very realistic workplace dialogue, including interruptions and overlapping speech, which is good practice, but the overall setting and character relationships provide that necessary context.
Yeah, The Office is famous for its, awkward realism.
Yeah.
You definitely hear how people actually talk in an office setting, but the situations are often so visually clear, someone doing something silly, a reaction shot, that you can often understand the meaning even if you miss a few words here and there.
Exactly. Light comedies like The Big Bang Theory or How I Met Your Mother also fit well here for intermediate
Really,
learners.
even with the science stuff and Big Bang Theory.
Surprisingly, yes, because despite having characters who are scientists, the show features quite accessible core dialogue in their everyday interactions and relationship discussions. The scientific jargon is often simplified or explained, or it's part of the joke itself. And How I Met Your Mother uses framing devices and narration that can sometimes add layers, but the core conversations between the friends are very natural, covering things like dating, careers, friendship, all relatable topics for many learners.
And the sources highlighted something I found interesting for intermediate learners. Reality shows like MasterChef or The Great British Bake Off. My initial thought was that, spontaneous speech would be too hard.
That's a valid thought because reality shows can have unpredictable moments, for sure. However, cooking shows like these often have a very clear structure. There are specific tasks, clear instructions given by judges or hosts, contestants describing their process. I'm just going to chop this now. I need to stir this quickly. And then feedback.
Right, there's a predictable flow.
Exactly. And the language used is often very practical and visual, describing ingredients. Methods like chop, stir, bake, tastes, textures. You see what they're talking about. The visual context of cooking, presenting the food, the judges tasting it, provides immense support for understanding the language being used, even if it's spoken spontaneously.
So it's a combination of that relatively focused vocabulary, food, cooking, and the strong visual context that makes them accessible, even with the spontaneous speech element.
That's a great insight. Okay, finally, let's talk about advanced learners. You're comfortable with everyday English. You can handle faster speech, more complex grammar. What's next?
For advanced learners, the goal is really to push into faster pace, more nuanced language, complex sentence structures, and perhaps more topic-specific or specialized vocabulary. This is where movies with rapid, real-life speech come into play. Think Inception, The Social Network, or even action movies that have dense dialogue like The Dark Knight.
Definitely challenging.
They are. The conversations can be very fast, characters might interrupt each other more often, and the vocabulary goes beyond just daily interactions into themes related to, science fiction, technology, philosophy, or intricate plots.
These are definitely less forgiving. You really have to be listening keenly, paying full attention. Exactly. You're training your ear to process information at pretty much native speed with minimal redundancy or sometimes fewer visual cues for every single word. News programs and documentaries are also excellent for advanced learners.
Like BBC News or TED Talks.
Precisely. Things like BBC News, CNN, Al Jazeera, or TED Talks, they expose you to more formal speech patterns, journalistic language, potentially a wider range of regional accents, and a vast array of vocabulary related to current events, science, history, culture, whatever the topic is. The delivery speed is often quite high, mimicking how you'd consume information in the real world if you lived in an English-speaking country.
And what about TV dramas? You mentioned some complex ones.
Yes, TV dramas with complex plots and sophisticated dialogue are great for this level. Shows like Breaking Bad, Sherlock, or even high-quality period dramas like Downton Abbey or The Crown.
Why those specifically?
Well, they often feature intricate character interactions, moral complexities, and language that uses more sophisticated vocabulary, nuanced expressions, and complex sentence structures. Sherlock, for instance, features incredibly fast deductions and explanations from the main character.
Oh, yeah. Benedict Cumberbatch talks so fast.
Exactly. It requires advanced comprehension just to follow his train of thought. Breaking Bad has characters from very different backgrounds using varying registers of language from scientific explanations in one scene to street slang in the next, depending on the situation.
So lots of variety there.
Huge variety. And period dramas often use slightly more formal or archaic language structures and vocabulary related to a specific historical context, which is another good challenge.
Okay, so the actionable step for you, listening right now, is to consider your current English level, honestly. Browse your streaming services or your movie library using these categories maybe as a guide. Pick something that genuinely sparks your interest because motivation is so important. And then apply that 50–70% test to a short clip. Listen without subtitles for a minute or so. If you feel like you're catching roughly half to maybe three-quarters of the dialogue, you've probably found a good starting point. Don't be afraid to try a few different things until you find that sweet spot for learning.
That's the crucial first step. Once you've identified your content, the next challenge immediately emerges. Actually understanding that fast-flowing, natural English. It's the reason many people feel like subtitles are essential all the time. But how do you really train your ear to hear what's being said, even when it's fast?
Because, as you mentioned earlier, native speakers don't speak like they're, dictating a book.
Mhm.
Words aren't these neat, isolated islands that kind of crash into each other, sounds change or disappear entirely. This connected speech is perhaps one of the biggest hurdles for learners, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. We learn words individually want to go, but we hear them blended together want to go.
Right.
Take a simple phrase like going to. In fast speech, it almost always becomes gonna. Want to becomes wanna. Got to becomes gotta. But it's not just these common contractions, these reductions. Sounds at the end of one word might blend seamlessly with sounds at the beginning of the next. For example, get out might sound more like ger out.
Yeah, the churat changes.
Right, the t becomes a flap sound, or did you eat yet might sound like did you eat yet. If you're listening specifically for the distinct sounds of did you day eat yet, your ear simply won't recognize the actual sound did you eat.
It's almost like learning a secret code for spoken English. But the good news is, this code is definitely learnable. The sources provide a systematic three-step listening exercise specifically designed to help you crack this code and train your ear to recognize these blended sounds and reductions.
Exactly. Step 1. Take a very short clip from your chosen movie or show. And the sources emphasize short, maybe just 10 to 15 seconds. Listen to this clip without any subtitles at all.
Okay, just raw audio. That might feel a bit daunting at first.
It definitely can. And the key here is to manage your expectations. The goal isn't to understand everything perfectly on the first go. The goal is simply to listen for anything you do recognize. Try to catch familiar words or phrases. Get a feel for the overall rhythm and speed. It's really just an initial assessment of what your ear is already picking up. It's totally okay if you understand very little the first time. That's completely normal and expected.
Okay, so step 1 is just like a baseline, listen, get your bearings. What's step 2?
Step 2 is where the real decoding begins. Listen to that exact same 10 to 15 second clip again, but this time turn the English subtitles on.
Okay, now you see the script.
Yes. And this is where you make those crucial connections between sound and text. As you listen, you'll see the written words on the screen. Now, you need to actively notice how those written words actually sound when they are spoken naturally and quickly in the clip. Pay close attention to where words seem to blend together, where sounds are dropped or changed, or where common contractions like gonna or wanna appear in the subtitles, where maybe your brain was expecting the full form going to or want to.
So this is where you bridge that gap between the written word you learned and the spoken sound you're actually hearing. You're seeing the words, what do you want to do tonight? But maybe hearing something closer to, what do y'all want to do tonight? And your brain finally makes the link. Oh, that sound means those words.
Exactly. That's the core insight of step 2. You're consciously mapping the blurry spoken sound to the distinct written words. The sources specifically highlight this transformation. You see, what do you want to do tonight? Written out, while hearing the reduced, flowing sound, what I want to do tonight,
Hmm.
By repeatedly seeing and hearing this connection, you start to train your brain to understand that what I wanna means what do you want to. This is incredibly powerful for training your ear to recognize spoken English as it's actually used. You're not just seeing words, you're seeing the sound of those words represented in text.
Almost like having a little translator for connected speech right there on the screen for you.
Hmm.
Okay, so step 2 is all about seeing and hearing together, actively noticing the difference between the written form and the spoken reality. Then, step 3.
Step 3 takes you back to pure listening again. You listen to the same 10 to 15-second clip without subtitles one more time.
Okay, and the goal now is,
The goal now is to see how much more you can understand purely by listening, leveraging the understanding you gained in step 2. You've now consciously linked the spoken sounds to the written words. In step 3, you are practicing recognizing those sounds like what I wanna and immediately understanding the words they represent without needing to read along. You're testing and reinforcing that new connection in your brain. Can I hear it now that I know what I'm listening for?
so you loop these 3 steps with that short clip, listen without, listen with subtitles, noticing the connections, listen without again until you feel you understand most of it just by hearing it. Is that the idea?
Precisely. The reason you use very short clips, like 10 or 15 seconds, is that it makes this repetitive process really manageable. You can listen to a 10-second clip 5 or even 10 times without feeling like you're spending forever on just one task. This focused, repetitive exposure on a small chunk of real, authentic English is what builds that sort of muscle memory in your ear and brain to quickly process connected speech and natural pronunciation patterns.
Yeah, I can see how doing this regularly, even for just a few short clips each day, would start to make a big difference over time. You're actively training your brain to decode faster speech patterns. It might feel slow at first, focusing on just 10 seconds, but imagine doing that with, say, 5 or 10 different clips over a week. That adds up to significant targeted practice.
It absolutely accumulates quickly. This method is designed to be systematic and effective, directly targeting that common difficulty of understanding rapid, natural speech. And this brings us naturally to the role of subtitles, which were essential in step 2 of that exercise, but as we hinted, they can be a bit of a double-edged sword sometimes.
That's something I hear often people say, you shouldn't use subtitles at all if you really want to improve your listening. Is that strictly true?
Well, it's partially true, maybe, but it's also a bit too simplistic. The common pitfall, as the sources definitely acknowledge, is overusing subtitles, particularly subtitles in your native language, or even just constantly using English subtitles without changing your approach or having a specific goal.
Right.
If you only watch with subtitles always on, especially if your reading speed is faster than your listening comprehension speed, which it often is for learners, your brain will naturally take the path of least resistance.
Makes sense.
It will prioritize reading the text on the screen because it's easier and faster to get the meaning that way, and it won't put in the necessary effort to actively process the sounds of the spoken English. You're essentially practicing your reading speed, not your listening comprehension skills.
Okay, so just having them on constantly passively is the problem. But you said used correctly, they're a powerful tool. So how do we use them the right way, strategically?
The sources outline a method that integrates subtitles strategically, building on that previous listening practice idea, but maybe for slightly longer sections. Step 1, watch a section of the movie or show. This could be a slightly longer scene than those 10-second flips, maybe 1 to 3 minutes long, with English subtitles turned on.
Okay, so unlike the listening exercise where you listen without first, here you actually start with the subtitles on.
Exactly, because the purpose here is slightly different. Here, the primary purpose is to connect the spoken sound to the written word more broadly and critically, to acquire new vocabulary and phrases and context. As you listen and watch, you see the words on the screen as they are spoken. This helps solidify the link between the sound and its written form. And crucially, when you encounter a new word or expression, you see it written down at the exact moment you hear it, and you see the situation in which it's being used.
Oh, yeah.
This simultaneous input, hearing the word, seeing the word written, and seeing the visual context makes it much easier to understand and, importantly, remember the meaning than just looking up a word in a dictionary later on out of context.
That makes a lot of sense. You're learning the word and how it's actually used naturally in a sentence and in the specific situation all at once.
Right. You're building a much richer understanding of the word or phrase. Then, step 2, watch that same 1 to 3 minute section again, but this time turn the English subtitles off.
Okay, this is the test phase again.
It is. Now that you've seen the script and hopefully learned some new things from seeing the words in step 1, You are forced to rely solely on your listening skills. You're actively trying to recognize the words and phrases you just encountered, maybe even those new ones, but without the safety net of the text. This step pushes your ear to work harder and helps you check how much of that learned vocabulary and those speech patterns you can now recognize purely by sound. It's pure listening practice, but it's informed by your initial viewing with the subtitles.
It feels like you're kind of cementing the learning from step one.
Yeah.
You saw it, you heard it, and now you're practicing hearing it again without the visual text cue.
Precisely. And then, step 3 in this particular subtitle method introduces an active production element, shadowing.
We touched on shadowing briefly earlier when talking about listening practice, but let's go deeper now as part of this subtitle strategy. What is it exactly?
Shadowing, in this context, means pausing the video after a character says a sentence or maybe just a short phrase and immediately repeating it yourself out loud. The key goal is to copy the character's pronunciation, their rhythm, and their intonation as accurately as you possibly can.
So if a character says, I'll be there in 5 minutes, I pause it and I try to say, I'll be there in 5 minutes, with the exact same speed and tone they use.
Exactly. And really pay attention to how they connect the words. The source gives that great example. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Often, a native speaker won't pronounce each word distinctly. The in 5 minutes part might blend together, and the stress and rhythm might not be what you expect if you just read the words individually off a page.
Right.
A native speaker might say it quite quickly, maybe blending in 5 and giving 5 a slight stress and maybe an elongated vowel sound, something like, I'll be there in 5 minutes. By trying to mimic that specific sound and that specific rhythm, you are training your mouth and your tongue muscles to produce English sounds more naturally. You're not just repeating the words, you're copying the music of the language.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just about saying the right individual sounds, but getting the overall flow and melody right. This combines subtitle method watching with English subtitles first to learn, then watching without to practice listening, and then shadowing lines to practice speaking seems incredibly comprehensive.
It really is. Watching with subtitles first helps you decode the language and learn new things in context. Watching again without subtitles forces you to practice recognizing the spoken form under pressure, relying on your ear. And shadowing activates your speaking muscles, reinforcing the crucial connection between what you hear and how you produce the sounds yourself. It's a powerful cycle that improves both your recognition of spoken English and your own pronunciation and fluency when you speak.
So, we've covered choosing the right content, doing systematic listening practice to understand fast speech, and using subtitles effectively to aid both listening and learning vocabulary. That naturally leads us to the next stage. Actively using these movies and TV shows to improve your actual speaking skills. How do we bridge that gap from input to output?
It's such a critical step. Listening and understanding are fundamental, of course, but if you can't produce the language yourself confidently, you probably feel you haven't fully mastered it.
Sure.
Fortunately, the same content we've been discussing provides excellent material for speaking practice, and the sources offer 2 very effective methods to focus on.
And the first one is shadowing again, right? It seems pretty versatile.
Yes, shadowing is so valuable. It really serves as both a listening aid, helping you really hear how words are pronounced and connected, and as a direct speaking exercise. As a speaking exercise, the focus is purely on mimicry. You choose a sentence or maybe just a short phrase from your movie or show. Listen carefully, maybe multiple times, to the character delivering it. Pay really close attention to their pronunciation, their rhythm, their intonation, even the emotion in their voice.
And then you try to say it exactly like them, like an echo.
Exactly. You can pause the video and repeat immediately after them, which is probably the easiest way to start. Or, for a bigger challenge, you could try to speak at the same time as the character, literally like being their shadow. The goal is to match their speech patterns as closely as possible. The sources give that simple but perfect example. Hey, long time no see.
Okay, I can picture that. Imagine hearing that said quickly, casually, with a friendly tone, and maybe this slight upward inflection at the end. Hey, long time no see.
Right. If you just read the words, hey, long time no see, off a page, you might say it very flatly, very robotically, perhaps.
Yeah.
But practicing saying it with that native rhythm and that native intonation helps you internalize not just the words themselves, but the feel of the phrase. You learn how to use it naturally in a real conversation. You're training your mouth and tongue muscles, yes, but you're also training yourself to sound more natural, more friendly, or perhaps more urgent, or whatever emotion the character is conveying. It builds fluency by getting your mouth used to forming common English phrases quickly and smoothly.
It's almost like Singing along to a song to get the rhythm and the pronunciation right. You're basically using the native speaker on screen as your personal vocal coach.
That's a great analogy. You're learning the tune of the language, not just the notes. The second speaking exercise mentioned is role play, which takes things a step further into more interactive practice.
Role play using a movie or show. How does that actually work?
Well, you pick a short conversation or maybe a scene from your chosen content that has dialogue between two or more characters. Then you decide which character you want to be.
Okay, so if there's a scene with, say, character A and character B talking back and forth, I decide, okay, I'm going to be character B this time.
Correct. Then you play the scene. When character A delivers their line, you pause the video immediately. Then you deliver character B's line yourself out loud.
Ah, I see. So I'm practicing my response to character A's dialogue in the moment.
Exactly. And again, the goal isn't just to say the words correctly, it's to try and match the tone, the emotion, and the speed of the original character B in that specific scene. If character A says something surprising or maybe annoying, and character B responds with, say, an exasperated sigh in a specific line, you try to deliver that line with the same feeling of exasperation in your voice.
This sounds definitely more challenging than just shadowing a single line in isolation.
Yeah.
You have to process what the other character just said and deliver your line with the right timing and the right emotion.
It is more complex, and that's precisely its value. It moves you beyond just repeating single sentences. You're practicing responding in context, even if it's a pre-written context from the show. It helps you think about how language is used interactively, how your line relates logically and emotionally to the previous line, and how to convey meaning and emotion through your voice, not just your words. It's practicing conversational flow and delivery, which is absolutely crucial for real-life speaking confidence.
Yeah, I can really see how this would help build confidence. You're not just talking at yourself in a mirror, you're having a kind of simulated conversation, albeit with a screen. It helps you embody the language more actively.
It absolutely does. You're actively using the language in a simulated back and forth exchange. Regular practice with both of these techniques, shadowing for pronunciation, rhythm and fluency, and role play for conversational rhythm, response timing, and delivery, using material that's appropriate for your level, will really accelerate your progress in speaking. You're taking that rich, authentic input from movies and TV and actively turning it into your own output.
Wow. Okay, we've really gone from identifying that initial challenge of understanding fast English to laying out a complete actionable system for using movies and TV to improve both listening and speaking. It's really not just passive entertainment anymore, is it? It's a structured learning experience if you approach it right. Let's quickly recap the core techniques we've covered just to make sure it's all clear.
Absolutely. If you're feeling that common frustration with understanding native English in media, or if you want to sound more natural yourself when you speak, the sources lay out these clear, powerful steps. First, that crucial step of selection. Use the 50-70% understanding rule listening without subtitles as your guide to find content that challenges you just enough without totally overwhelming you.
And remember, our level-specific suggestions as starting points. Beginners aim for clarity. Think animated movies like Toy Story or Finding Nemo. Everyday sitcoms like Friends or Modern Family, or even simple, clear kids shows like Peppa Pig or Bluey.
Intermediate learners, you can handle faster, more natural conversations. Try light dramas like Brooklyn Nine-Nine or The Office, comedies like The Big Bang Theory or How I Met Your Mother, or those visually supported reality shows like MasterChef or The Great British Bake Off.
And advanced learners, it's time to push your limits. Go for fast-paced films like Inception or The Social Network, news programs and documentaries like BBC News or TED Talks, and TV dramas with complex dialogues like Breaking Bad or Sherlock.
Right. Once you have your content, you need to systematically train your ears to decode that fast speech. Use the 3-step listening exercise on those short 10 to 15-second clips. Listen first without subtitles to gauge understanding. Then listen with English subtitles to see what you missed and consciously notice connected speech and reductions, what I wanna, instead of what do you want to. And finally, listen without subtitles again to test your improved comprehension just by ear.
And remember to use subtitles strategically, not just as a constant crutch. For learning new vocabulary and linking sound to text, watch a slightly longer section with English subtitles first. Then, for pure listening practice, watch that same section again without any subtitles.
And throughout all of this, try to integrate shadowing. That means pausing the video and repeating lines immediately after the characters, really focusing on copying their pronunciation, their rhythm, and their intonation. This is so vital for both recognizing sounds better and improving your own speaking clarity.
And for dedicated speaking practice, continue with that shadowing of individual lines or phrases to refine your accent and fluency. But also actively practice role play. Select scenes, choose a character, and deliver that character's lines yourself, trying to match the original performance's tone and speed in response to the other character's dialogue.
These aren't just abstract ideas, you know? They are concrete, practical techniques you can literally start implementing today, right after listening to this. They transform watching movies and TV from something passive into a dynamic, engaging, and genuinely highly effective way to learn and significantly improve your English skills.
All right, now that you have this entire toolkit, it's definitely time to put it into action. So here's your challenge for today.
Okay, step one. Go find a movie or a TV show that actually interests you, and using the guidelines we discussed, especially that 50-70% rule, try to determine if it might be a good fit for your current level. Once you think you've found one, pick a very short clip, just 10 to 15 seconds long. Maybe it's a moment with dialogue you particularly liked, or just a random sample to start.
Step 2. Apply that three-step listening exercise directly to that clip. Listen without subtitles. First, see what you catch. Then listen with English subtitles, paying close attention to how the words sound together compared to how they're written. Really notice any reductions or connected speech. Finally, listen without subtitles one last time and see how much more you can understand just by listening.
And step three, choose just one sentence from that clip. Maybe one that sounded particularly fast to you, or one that had interesting connected speech you noticed. Pause the video right after the character says it and shadow that single sentence. Try to say it out loud exactly like the character, focusing intensely on mimicking their specific pronunciation and their rhythm.
And we would genuinely love for you to reflect on this experience afterwards. After you've completed your challenge, just take a moment to think about it. What show or movie did you end up choosing? What was the short clip actually about? What felt like the hardest part of that process for you? Was it catching the words on the very first listen without any help? Was it noticing exactly how the words were connected when the subtitles were on? Or was it maybe trying to get your mouth to make the sounds exactly like the character when you shadowed?
Yeah. And did you notice any specific new words or phrases or maybe particular speech patterns that you want to remember or practice more? Thinking about these questions just for a minute or two will really help solidify what you learned from the exercise.
Mhm.
And maybe consider this provocative thought. You spent perhaps 5 or 10 minutes really focusing intently on just 10 or 15 seconds of dialogue. Think about how much rich, authentic, real-world English is packed into that tiny sliver of time. All those nuances of pronunciation, rhythm, connected speech, vocabulary used in perfect context, natural sentence structure.
It's incredible when you break it down.
It really is. When you move from just passively watching to actively engaging with the language in this detailed way, you unlock a vast amount of learning potential that was always there, right in front of you, just waiting to be discovered. Even a scene you've watched many times before can become a completely new learning opportunity when you approach it with these active techniques.
It really does make you appreciate the incredible density of natural spoken language. It's not just a simple string of words. It's this complex tapestry of sound and meaning woven together.
Precisely. Now, we've focused really heavily today on using movies and TV shows where you generally have visual cues and often the option of subtitles available. But what about situations where you don't have those aids? What about something like, say, a phone call in English?
Oh, phone calls. Yeah, that's a huge challenge for so many English learners, isn't it? It's purely auditory. You can't see the other person's face for clues. You can't see their gestures. There's no visual context at all to help you understand or be understood. It's just voice, often down a crackly line.
It absolutely requires a different and in some ways much more challenging set of listening and speaking skills. You need specific strategies and, frankly, specific language for navigating those purely audio conversations successfully. But don't worry, we won't leave you hanging on that one.
That's exactly why our very next deep dive is going to be all about building your confidence in handling phone calls in English. We're going to give you the essential language and the practical techniques you need to feel more comfortable on the phone.
We'll cover really practical things like how to start and end phone conversations politely and naturally, moving beyond just hello and goodbye. We'll give you lots of useful phrases for common phone tasks, things like making appointments, leaving clear messages, asking for specific information, or making sure you get connected to the right person or department.
And critically, we'll equip you with strategies for dealing with perhaps the most stressful part of phone calls. Misunderstandings. What happens when you don't catch something? How do you politely ask someone to repeat themselves? maybe multiple times. How do you clarify information effectively? How do you confirm that you've understood correctly when you can't see them nodding or shaking their head?
It's a completely different skill set from face-to-face interaction or even video calls. And mastering it is pretty essential for many real-world situations, whether it's personal or professional. You absolutely don't want to miss that deep dive if phone calls in English make you even a little bit nervous.
So you've got your challenge for today with movies and TV. Go pick your clip, try the three-step listening exercise, and shadow that sentence. And remember that learning a language is definitely a journey, and it really should be one you enjoy as much as possible, integrating activities you already love, like watching great shows and movies. But using these active techniques makes the process not only more effective, but also genuinely more fun.
So start watching and start practicing today. And be ready for our next session, where we'll tackle the unique challenge of English phone calls head-on.
Until then, keep listening, keep talking, keep practicing, and most importantly, enjoy the process of learning English.
See you next time.